Okay, great. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for taking the time to join us for tonight's DC Plug Theater 15171 open house meeting. My name is Peyton Manning from Tina Boyd & Associates, and my team and I are providing additional outreach support for Pepco and DDOT on this DC Plug initiative theater. The purpose of the evening's meeting is to provide a brief overview of the DC Plug project and an update on the design activity for Theater 15171. This project will run through Ward 8, largely along Savannah Street Southeast and Congress Street in the Congress Heights neighborhood, focusing on the undergrounding of the overhead power lines in order to increase resiliency in the area. In this meeting, we also hope to address any questions and concerns that you may have about the design and upcoming construction. Tonight's meeting will be led by Ms. Donna Cooper, Anthony Soriano, and Yamani Kadane. However, before I hand it over to them, I would like to make sure that you're aware this meeting will be recorded so that we can accurately capture your comments and concerns. The team will start by doing a presentation. Everyone's mic except the presenters will be muted during the presentation to avoid any background noise. If you have any questions throughout the meeting, we ask you leave them in the Q&A section of the application. To open up the presentation, I'll be sharing a brief video with you which highlights the DC Plug Initiative's process when undergrounding these power lines.
The District of Columbia has experienced more violent storms in recent years, resulting in extensive power outages. For this reason, the District and Pepco are working to reduce power outages by moving many of the overhead power lines underground to improve the infrastructure and enhance resiliency. Neighborhoods affected by construction will be notified well in advance of the project start date. This will include the posting of no parking signs. Construction will begin with the coordination of streets and neighborhoods. Signs will be posted, and flaggers will direct vehicles and pedestrians around construction crews. Before any digging begins, other existing utility lines that may be in the path of construction will be carefully identified and marked in the field. In some cases, small plants, trees, and grass will need to be removed from public spaces to allow for digging and placement of new underground equipment. But we will do our best to retain as much vegetation as possible. Any public property disturbed by this work will be restored to its original condition. Construction workers will use asphalt saws to cut the pavement. A backhoe will dig a trench for the placement of the distribution line. Periodically along the main primary line, manholes and tap holes will be required to house equipment and to provide access for inspections and repairs. The backhoe will also be utilized in these cases to excavate for these structures. In order to meet jurisdictional safety requirements, shoring will be provided in the trench to ensure stability. Pepco uses either fiberglass or plastic PVC conduit to protect underground power lines. Concrete will be poured into the trench to encase and secure the conduit, and steel plates will be placed over the trench temporarily to make the road usable to vehicle traffic. After the concrete is set, the steel plates will be removed and the trench will be repaved in sections. Transformers, switches, and other ancillary equipment will be set in place. Equipment such as transformers and switches will be installed either in the roadway or the sidewalk, depending on space availability. Underground cable will be installed. Landscaping will be restored as needed and roads paved. Overhead primary electric wires will be removed from poles, but secondary service and communication lines will remain. Finally, the new underground power lines will be energized. While electricity will remain on throughout the project, there will be a short scheduled outage needed to switch from the overhead lines to the new underground system. We appreciate your patience while the District and Pepco improve the future of electrical service for the District of Columbia residents.
I hope that gives you a brief understanding of what construction will look like when that comes. Again, for this feeder, this is currently a design project, so we are some time away from construction, and right now we're just trying to get a good understanding of any feedback you may have on what our current design looks like. Now I would love to pass it to Donna Cooper, Pepco's region president, for a brief opening remark.
Thank you very much, Peyton. First of all, I wanted to just thank you for being with us on this evening to discuss the DC Powerline Undergrounding Initiative. As I was reflecting, this year actually marks the 10-year anniversary related to the derecho. And this particular project and initiative came about after the derecho in the District of Columbia. Of course, it impacted a broader segment of our region. It went north, it went west, but what it resulted in, it was almost like a hurricane on land. And that particular event resulted in multiple days of outages for our customers. We were in the process of implementing what was known as our Reliability Enhancement Plan in the District of Columbia. And that particular event, it came through very rapidly. It was strong, it was quick, but it brought down trees, it brought down the power lines, it brought down our poles, it brought down our transformers. And during that period of time, it was Mayor Gray, and he engaged our CEO at the time regarding how do we come together and really focus on a plan to focus on more resilient infrastructure, because that was something that was referenced by Peyton. It's one thing to talk about reliability, it's another to talk about resiliency. And with resilient infrastructure, you inherently also have more reliable electric service as well. So we literally came together and worked together for over a year, evaluating what were our options regarding undergrounding the infrastructure, because that was the solution to create more resilient infrastructure. We were at the table with the Office of the People's Council, the Public Service Commission, a representative of the council. I recall the city administrator co-chaired that along with our CEO at that time. We had representatives from DDOT and some of the other key governmental agencies. So it was a wide range, and also other utilities were at the table. After working together for 1 year, we came up with a plan to execute specific to undergrounding power lines. There was a huge focus on affordability. There was a focus on where were we going to execute this work. And I don't know how many of you are aware, but the downtown footprint has largely been underground. The areas in which we do not have a high significance of underground power lines was wards 3, 4, 5, 7, and 8. So this project focused on those particular wards. We also looked at where were we having the highest level of outages through modeling when we had these storm events. Also, we were looking at the reliability of the feeders. And so we were looking at cost implications as well as the most impact regarding the upgrading of infrastructure and the outcomes for residents. So we developed that plan. The Council of the District of Columbia actually passed legislation effectuating that particular plan. And it also involves the Public Service Commission because we are a regulated utility. So the commission has to review that plan. And this was a very different and a very positive partnership, because the partnership is between Pepco and the District of Columbia government through DDOT to underground and execute the work that we're performing. The Office of the People's Council, Pepco, and others, when we had talked about undergrounding power lines in the past, a huge focus of it was obviously cost. But the construct that we advanced was able to significantly bring down the cost of this implementation. It was amortized over a period of 60 years. So there is a DDOT surcharge, and there is a surcharge on our particular bills that customers currently are ultimately paying. But at the same time, we structured it where those customers who qualify for the residential aid discount program are exempted from this particular charge on their particular bills. But one of the things that we talked about infrastructure and reliability and resiliency, when you have major storm events, and individuals are impacted with outage events that are multiple days. You have businesses that are ultimately closed. This was about avoiding those huge economic impacts as well as losses to customers in that particular respect. So we're very pleased that we came up with a solution, one that was unanimously endorsed by all of the stakeholders that I just shared, because we were able to significantly bring that cost down as well as achieving outcomes with more resilient infrastructure. And what I'm very excited about is that we went through a legislative process. We had to revise certain aspects of the plan. It's a $500 million project and initiative that's being executed over multiple years. As many people can appreciate, it takes some time to get things executed. So we had to go through that process of approvals with the commission. Biennial plans are filed because the commission reviews what we're proposing to do and makes decisions on the execution of that plan. But what I'm excited about is that it has really come together in the context that we're now moving forward at a more accelerated pace of moving these feeders forward that are serving our communities, where we will have projects occurring almost in every single ward, 3, 4, 5, 7, and 8 simultaneously. And there's equity that's associated with this project. When I talked about evaluating feeders to determine which ones were performing the worst in terms of when we would look at the number of outages when it came to storm events, et cetera, we knew that based on that data, you could have fallen into a situation where one specific ward in terms of performance may have gotten additional feeders that would have been undergrounded. But what we did, we ranked them, but ensured that every ward was getting an equal distribution as it relates to the number of feeders that would be executed to be undergrounded. So I wanted to turn it over at this time to Yamani, as well as Anthony Soriano with DDOT to talk further. And one huge piece of this, and I'll share this, is that this project is also about local contracting and diverse contracting opportunities. So there was a 100% goal in the legislation that spoke to who is executing this work. So if we're having to contract out for this work, we're working very hard to ensure that local and diverse business enterprises that are in the District of Columbia are executing this work. We will literally have a forum that will come up again in January to ensure that, again, local contractors are aware of the next phases as well as opportunities. So I'll turn it over now to the experts on this project to share additional information, and we look forward to taking any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Donna. Good evening, everyone. My name is Yamani Kidana. I'm the manager of project execution here at Pepco. I oversee the DC Plug initiative. So Donna covered the background and highlighted that, the program has received approval through the Public Service Commission, the first biennial being approved around November 2017, the second biennial approved in January 2020, and the third biennial approved in January 2022. So through the first, second, and third biennial, we have a total of 20 feeders approved for undergrounding. And as Donna stated, this is a $500 million initiative, of which $250 million portion of the budget comes from the Pepco portion, and then $187.5 million of the budget comes from the district, and the remainder of the budget comes from the DDOT capital improvement funding. So the Pepco and district portion of the budget are recovered through a surcharge on customer bills. Again, as stated by Donna, this is a resiliency project. Again, it's major storm events, and it's going to improve the resiliency and the reliability of the distribution electric system. So it's a multi-year program. We had a first feeder construction started in 2019. Right now, like I said, we have 20 feeders approved under the initiative, and the first one was placed in service in 2020. So how do we go about selecting a feeder? Again, we maintain the word equity, but the first, we follow a 5-step process. The first one being looking at the reliability data. So depending on which biennial we're talking about, we look at the data all the way from January 1st of 2010, all the way, for example, for the first biennial until December 31st of 2016, and maybe for the third biennial from January 2010 to December 2021. So we look at the reliability data and then rank the feeders based on these reliability metrics, which is the safety, SAIDI, and customer minutes of interruption reduced per dollar. And then we identify the highest ranked feeders on each of the 5 wards. The 5 wards that are active for DC Plaza, Ward 3, 4, 5, 7, and 8. Like stated earlier, Ward 1, 2, and 6 are mostly underground. And then we analyze ongoing reliability work that is currently being undertaken as a plant system work within Pepco. So we don't do, if a feeder is already identified for reliability work, we'll take that feeder out of the highly ranked feeders. And then we work with the District Department of Transportation, DDOT, to identify opportunities to take advantage of existing plant DDOT roadway work so that we can take the advantage of the civil work being budgeted already under DDOT, so we can reduce the cost of the projects. So following these steps, we finalize the selection process and then file a biennial plan, and the biennial plans get reviewed by the commission and gets approved. So we have 3 biennials that have received approval to date. Next slide. So what does DC Plug do, right? We've shown on a video, but the scope of DC Plug can be summarized by this diagram here and the next one. So in the current overhead state of the distribution systems, where we have the primaries, laterals, and secondaries already overhead, if a tree falls, as depicted at the middle top of the page, you can see a tree falling and hitting the primary lines, and you can see the houses changing from green to red. That shows the houses have their power out of service. So they have experienced an outage because the system is already overhead. Now, as we underground the primaries and laterals, the neighborhood is going to remain, it's not going to experience a power outage because the system is already underground. You can see that the same tree falls because it's not hitting any overhead wires. Majority of the houses remain green. Of course, we are going to keep the secondaries overhead for a cost saving reasons. And you can see, like, if a tree at the bottom of the page goes down, only a few houses will experience versus the entire neighborhood. So that's the main objective of DC Plug is, undergrounding the primaries and laterals so that, we can minimize outages associated with the storm events on the primaries and laterals. Next slide. With that, I'll pass it on to Anthony Soriano from DDOT.
Thanks so much, Imani. What we see here is our current status and timeline for the Feeder 15171 design. We kicked this project off back in April of 2022. We had various submissions, 30%, our most recent was 65%, just in November. Over the course of the design, we've had a meeting with our council member in Ward 8, also attended ANC meetings for those ANCs that the footprint of this project falls within. Currently, we're conducting this open house, and then our next two milestones are the 100% design submission anticipated for February of 2023, and then the final plan, specification, and estimate package, which will allow us to move into the construction procurement process. Next slide, please. And speaking of construction, when that procurement process is completed, we will have a contractor on board to perform the civil construction, which will begin likely in winter of 2024, so January, February 2024, current expected start date. The construction is anticipated to take over a year, but it's segmented. You'll see some overview map a little later. And then following the completion of the civil work, which is the installation of the underground duct banks and the structures, a Pepco contractor will come in to do the electrical cable installation, the equipment, which will be housed within those various structures, energizing that new underground system, de-energizing the overhead, and removing any of those overheads that have been de-energized. We'll also take advantage of the ability to cut down the tops of any utility poles that are having some equipment and cables removed, just to improve some aesthetics. Go ahead and move us into the next slide. Thanks so much. So the scope of work, once we get out there to start the civil work, and some of this was addressed in that video that you saw, erosion and sediment control will be placed around the project site. The duct bank work will commence, which will include the excavation, the placement of those pipes, the conduit underground, various structures. We'll see some of those in a little bit. Following the completion of that duct bank and structure installation, we'll get roadway restoration. There will be temporary restoration as the work proceeds, but final restoration will occur at the end. Following that will be pavement markings, including crosswalks, any crosswalks that may have been disturbed. We'll also look to improve any existing crosswalks that might not be up to the current standards as far as the markings go. And then again, once the civil work is complete, that electrical work will follow. Next slide, please. And here we see some examples of the structures that are included in the scope of work. At completion, they will be at grade and typically housed between the curb and sidewalk. Sometimes they will be within the sidewalk. I will note that all of this work is taking place within the public right-of-way. So none of this work falls on private property. We understand that residents are responsible for the upkeep of this land between the curb, between the street and their home. So there's a lot of ownership that is understood, right? You take pride in the property that's there. And we want to make sure that we work with all the residents that may be impacted by the installation of these structures. We try to strategically place them so that they are in locations that are not as impactful as they could be. And anyone that might have one of these structures located near their property, adjacent to their property, will be contacted separately so that we can provide a little bit more detail in a kind of one-on-one situation. Next slide, please. So here you'll see an overview of the footprint of this feeder project, depicted in purple. There are some other areas that are shaded. Those are one segment. The darker gray is a section that was determined that it would not be worked on for this project. The lighter gray is a future feeder project, feeder 15174. Peyton touched on the general location of this feeder project. You have Alabama Avenue as the northernmost boundary. It extends from 10th Place Southeast to the west, all the way over to Southern Ave with Savannah Street on the far right side of the screen. with another segment that is Stanton Place in between those two segments. Our next few slides, we're going to actually take a look at the current routing of the underground system. The lighter blue is depicts the duct bank, what will be completely underground and not visible after the work is complete. The blue, the darker blue, are structures proposed and current locations proposed for those structures. And again, we saw a few slides back what those would look like upon completion, visible at grade. And I should have touched on what those structures are when we saw the image. We can maybe go back a little later, but there's tap holes, transformer enclosures, and line manholes, switch manholes. Those house all the equipment that's necessary. If you look at your existing overhead, you might see some gray or silver-ish cylinders. Those are transformers. Those are going to be placed underground in what we call a transformer enclosure. So you'll see those removed from the poles, as well as the highest lines on those utility poles, which are those primary electrical lines. I will note again that all of this work is contained completely within the public right-of-way. Next thing we'll touch on once we finish up these current alignments of the duct bank and structures is our maintenance of traffic during construction. What we have is we want to make sure we maintain the accessibility for all residents and businesses, and also services that are provided, mail, trash removal, recycling removal. We want to make sure that that's all coordinated so that you have no interruptions during the work. There will be occasional parking impacts. We'll make sure that there's advance notice with the emergency no parking signs placed no less than 72 hours in advance when we need to have vehicles removed for the installation for this work. We also will be ensuring the safe accommodation of pedestrians and cyclists throughout our construction. And then there will be constant public outreach from our communications teams with residents, with businesses, and any stakeholders within the limits of the project. The next few slides are going to show just some of the configurations that we might see of the maintenance of traffic while work is occurring within the roadway. There'll be traffic drums or cones separating the work from the travelway. Again, you'll see vehicular, cyclist, and pedestrian traffic maintained throughout. These are just kind of typical. There might be some instances where the variations from what you see in these slides might be necessary. There may be an occasion where a roadway shutdown might need to occur for the installation of a larger structure. That would just be a temporary shutdown, maybe a couple hours to get a crane set up in place, remove the structure from the back of a flatbed truck, placed into the excavation, and then the crane can be demobilized and moved from the site, and the roadway would be reopened. Again, those would all be communicated with any impacted residents well in advance of that work taking place. And then at this point, I would like to turn it over to Raisha Kwari, who will discuss our communication strategy. Thanks so much.
Good evening, everyone. 1 second. All right, so I'm going to go over, my name is Raisha Kwari. I work with the DC Plug Comms team. We're going to go over the integrated community strategy, that DC Plug education plan, the DC Plug education plan, which we implement during the construction phase of the project. So right now we're in the design phase for this feeder. And so far in the design phase, we have met with Councilmember White. I know myself, Donna Cooper, and Monica Cunningham met with him. We also have given notification to the mayor's office. And then we did a high-level presentations to the ANCs, 8C and 8E. Now that we're further in our design, we are hosting tonight's open house. And next up, we plan on doing phone calls and door-to-door outreach to those customers that have the transformer enclosures that Anthony just spoke about near their homes in the right-of-way. At the end of the design phase, we will leave customers a one-pager that summarizes all this information and an estimated start for construction. So, to ensure proper engagement, the DC Plus Communications team has created a customer education plan for the construction phase of the project, like I said earlier. Per the education plan, the customers will receive notification in the form of door knockers, flyers, emails, postcards, or even corridor signs. And they'll get this notification at least 30 days prior to construction, again at least 15 days prior to construction, and again at 7 days prior to construction. So during the construction phase, our outreach teams typically meet with the ANCs or attend the meetings on a regular basis so that we're always in the loop and we're staying engaged throughout the process of construction. We also have our project hotline, which is 1-844-758-4146 for anyone who has any questions or concerns. We have just launched a brand new website early this year, at the dcpluginfo.com. On there you can write a comment if you want to be added to any email list for any specific feeders. That would be great. We encourage engagement. We also have a dedicated email address that's questions@dcpluginfo.com. Next slide. Peyton, I'm going to pass it back over to you.
I can take it from here, Ray. Thank you. So we're about to open up the Q&A period, but first I wanted to draw everybody's attention to our Title VI survey. If anybody wouldn't mind taking a minute at the end of the meeting to go ahead and fill out the survey. If you join from your computer, you'll be automatically redirected to the survey. But otherwise, you can find the survey at rebrand.ly/DCplug Ward 8-comments. Again, that's rebrand.ly/DCplug Ward 8-comments. If you wouldn't mind just filling out that survey, it'd be very beneficial to us. But now I think we can jump right into the Q&A period. And again, if you have any questions, we ask that you leave them in the Q&A section. I do see that there was one that came through. If you are calling in from your phone, if you hit *3, you can raise your hand and we can unmute you so you can have an opportunity to chat. The first question that I see is a resident on Savannah Street wants to know how this will impact their parking and about how long parking impacts are typically going to remain. Anthony, I know you covered that a bit in the slide, but.
Yes, thanks, Peyton. Really, it's all dependent on where the specific work is taking place. If there is duct bank installation or a structure installation on this particular block of Savannah, it'll move in a linear fashion. You know, they'll start at one point and then make their way down the block. They typically get in about 100 feet in a given day, but they'll need additional space just for trucks, equipment, and other items. I think it varies. The simple answer is it varies. It's not going to be weeks at a time. It may be a couple days, and it won't be 24/7. The cars would have to be removed in the morning before the work starts, and then they'd be welcome to come back and park in those areas at the end of the day. We'll be sure to have representatives available to provide specific direction and information during construction. But if you'd like, you can reach me via email, and I can, if you give me your address, I can provide some more kind of specifics on what might occur in your area.
Great, yeah. Thanks, Anthony, and thank you for that question. And as you said, there will typically be notice 72 hours beforehand. If there are any parking impacts coming to your neighborhood, you'll see signage posted and likely door knockers posted to let you know what's going on. And I don't see any other questions. Let me see if anybody has a hand raised. Again, if you're calling in, you can press *3. We can see that you raised your hand and we can unmute you. Or any questions in the Q&A box or the chat we can address as well. One last check. I'm not seeing any additional questions. I want to thank everybody for joining the meeting this evening and wish you and your families good health and a happy holidays. And I appreciate it. I will conclude tonight's meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh,
I
sorry.
did see another picture just showed up. Question,
one more question that popped up. Thank you, Nair. So what are the costs associated to each of us? I don't know if you mind.
Customers, probably each customer might have been the question.
Oh, I went us. Thank you, Anthony, for clearing that up. Okay, there we go.
Yeah, so there's more information to this, but the cost is per kilowatt hour usage. I think on our fact sheets that we have on the website, there's a cost. For example, I think the last time I saw was about and don't quote me on this, but about $1.20 for the DDOT portion per 600 kilowatt hour, and it could be like 10 cents for the Pepco portion, given the Pepco portion gets recovered over a long period of time. And then, as Donna indicated, residential aid customers don't get to see the cost. But if you want more details, we have the fact sheets uploaded to the website, but you can also send an email that we can address directly.
And I believe, Yamani, is there a portion on the bill that shows what amount is going to be directed to the DC Plug project? I believe on the back of the bill.
Correct. So there is a separate surcharge, one for the Pepco portion, one for the district portion that shows how much you're being charged for the DC Plug initiative.
And this is going to every Pepco customer across the city, correct? It's not?
It is going through all Pepco customers within DC.
Yeah, so. And let's see if there's any other questions coming through. Okay, here we go. How do you obtain a waiver for the additional cost? Is that a possibility?
What do you, as a customer, how do you? I'm not sure if there's any waiver. I think this is approved through a legislation by the Council of the District of Columbia, and then also approved by the Public Service Commission. Unless you're a residential aid customer, and maybe there could be additional exceptions. There's no way to get a waiver from not seeing the surcharge. And I don't know, Donna, if you want to add more on that.
And again, this is something that everybody across the city's been paying. It's not like because this project is coming that this is a new fee that you'll see on your bill. It's been built into the bill for quite some time now. And I believe we're talking a few cents per bill, a few dollars per bill, nothing crazy.
Correct.
Just give it a few more moments in case any other questions come through, but thank you for those questions. Those are great questions.
Can Donna be unmuted?
Let's see. Did Donna hop back on? Donna might have hopped off.
Okay.
Is she here?
Yeah.
Yeah. See if we can unmute Donna. Okay. Is Molly on the call?
Yeah, no, thank you. I had rejoined, but I could not take myself off. Can people hear me now?
You're back, yep.
Okay, excellent. And Yamani, you answered it correctly, because when someone asks a question about a waiver, if a customer ultimately does qualify and enrolls in RAD, then they would not have the impact. But at the same time, the charges are just right at a little bit over $1 per month, and it's been on customers' bills for a couple of years now. So it's just a little bit over $1 per month for customers where there is a charge. And we socialized it across all customers, and that was one of the reference points that was made by Peyton. So customers across all wards, although the work is being executed in wards 3, 4, 5, 7, and 8, do experience that particular surcharge because there is a broader benefit from a resilience perspective to undergrounding the lines across the District of Columbia.
Great. Thank you so much, Donna, and thank you for coming back. I hopped off prematurely. And let's give it another moment or so to see if there's any more questions that come through. Check the chat. And again, I'm seeing nothing additional. So again, I'd like to thank you guys for joining tonight's meeting, and again, have a happy holidays and a great night.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Molly.